Oshio Ganale. Hello, friend. We're here with Larry Belitz, owner of Sioux Replications, and today he's going to show you how to sharpen an Elkhorn scraper and how to properly use that.
This is a buffalo hide that I just fleshed and left a few spots here so I can show you how the scraper works. This is the Elkhorn scraper. It's made from the head of an antler of an elk. This would be where the head of the elk would be, or the horn would be, and there's a broad tine. Up about 4 inches is the second tine. The Indians would cut into that tine and then put their blade there. At one time it would have been stone blade. And here the horn spreads up and starts wide. You want the longest distance possible. So this is called a Wahintka, and the blade is setting there. But the purpose of the video is I have a customer that wanted to see how the scraper works. But also the most important for him is also how you sharpen it, which I'll show later and how it fits in there. So this buffalo, I just washed the hide this morning and stretched on the frame. That took about an hour. And I fleshed it here, and I left some up there just because I was going to show some other things. But here's the backbone of the buffalo. And if the Elkhorn is sharp, now it got all this off, but it left some membrane here. Now if you have that membrane there, it will not tan because nothing will go through that. So the scraper got a little dull for me here. To sharpen it, this isn't really sharpened, it's already sharp. But there's a burr edge along here. And we have to maintain that edge so it's straight up. So underneath the blade is completely flat. And what I'll do here is very lightly go up just slightly above flat to bring it up because it probably curled. And now I'll go flat. From the top, now it may have curled over this way. So real lightly, I'm just going here a couple times real light. Bring up the bottom again, and then do this. And this is very light. It'd be the difference between cutting and not cutting. It's very particular, the angle. Now the little chattering, that's because the hide's bouncing. This little marks here. Here I'll change my angle because this is from skinning. Real thin there, it almost goes through it. So I have to change the angle. This is just dirt here. There's a little membrane here. If you don't get the membrane off, you won't tan. That's the biggest mistake people have. They cut the fat and meat off, and they think they have everything clean. Here you can see a lot of membrane. It's a little too greasy for my scraper right now. I have to let it dry a little bit. But that's all membrane. And if that stays on there, again, nothing goes through it. There's some fat on top of it. These are from skinning. They ran a knife blade. You might see it here, starting here. And it got too deep there, and that's a hole. That would be sewn up later with sinew. Now I'll just show you what I do. I try to overlap. But this is off, everything's off, but there's a little membrane. There's a little membrane. So I can take it off now or wait until maybe tomorrow morning when it dries a little bit, and I can scrape that even a little better. Right now it's really slippery and greasy, so this has to really be sharp to do that. But I got it off now by going at an angle. But it's really hard for people to see it if they've never tanned before. That there's a little membrane right there. The true hide is fuzzy. When you get tan, that's the fuzz that you see. This is dirt mostly that I'm taking off right here. There's a little bit of membrane here. I'm working my way across. But my scraper isn't working well because it's grabbing, that burr edge is grabbing some of the fat. So I want to take that off. And again, I can dress that up a little bit. Bring this down. Bring this up lightly. And very lightly bring it down again. Maybe once more. It's real light, just a touch. But it's that little touch makes the difference in cutting and not cutting. And here I'll tackle this. So when the scraper is sharp, it's very fast. This is a hip that has a tight fiber, so the hide is a little tighter and it's a little easier to push. But you certainly have to thin the hide. So this Elkhorn scraper is taking the fat and meat off, but it's also later used for thinning. I might show a little thinning. It's still kind of wet here. I might not be able to, but if there I took a layer off. So I can go over it like this, and I'm taking off hide so it's thinner. This will tan better. This is the by the tail and the hip. If you don't get this thin, it's too thick for brains to penetrate deeply. You get what we call a surface tan. The brains will penetrate if you get everything off, and that membrane is so important. A deer is a lot easier because it doesn't have a thick membrane. Now it's sliding again. There's some meat hanging in there. If this is really sharp, you don't have to push that hard. When it gets dull, that's when you start pushing. And I have an exact distance. Most Indian scraping blades are this wide. And they're curved. If you had it straight, the edges would gouge. And I have people think you want a wider blade, but then you got it only works right here. If you look at what I've scraped off, it's just this part here that really scrapes. If it gets a little dull, then you might turn your blade a little bit and work off the edge. But you don't want this edge catching. So for the Elkhorn, hold it down here, this hand over here, just to keep it from turning. Again, I'm a little careful because that's a skinning scar. It's real thin there, so I have to go sideways. Or else I'll get right into it and aggravate, might open up a hole. Yeah, since my string came loose, let me just show you. For holding the blade on, people have, in the past, had trouble with the blade sliding around. So I take it off. I've done 1,500 buffalo with that scraper. I might be close to 2,000 by now. That's for tanning the hide, scraping. This is used for thinning, and then it's also the same tool that you use for taking the wool off, or the hair off of the deer, or wool off of a buffalo. And I'll show that maybe another time. So here's the wrap. It's about 3 feet. And then this is so important to know. I've used that blade for all these hides, so it's getting worn down from sharpening. But the blade sits into a pouch. And the reason for that pouch is so that when you wrap this around, it won't slide. If you just had a blade next to that, it would slide all over. So I want it to stick up about that far, and then around, around, and then with the wrap, have about 4 or 5 inches. Go over itself, so it will not, so you can pull on it. Then you go wraps around this way. And if you do it right, nothing's going to slide around on you. And then we do a bow. Indians usually did just a double or single bow, not a double like what we white people use. So now it'll be set to go. And again, before I start, I'll just go over the top. That's pushing that edge over. It took me 7 years to figure all this out. It's very delicate. And then bring that, I'm tipping up just slightly. I mean, it's flat, but I'm just going a little bit above, beyond flat. And then maybe right here. And then it's ready to go. And if it doesn't cut, then you go and try the angle again. Just 1 or 2 degrees difference is the difference between cutting and not cutting. So here's another blade. Somebody wants to buy a blade for me, so I'll show you how that will go. The blades the Indians used were from the blacksmiths. And these are good high carbon. But this person wants a blade, so I just finished sewing a pouch for him. In the pouch, I've seen in museums this displayed backwards, like they would put it this way. I'm just going to move this way. So it's just a buckskin sinew sewn. So if it's here, that way it won't slide. There's friction with this. So you want to go around and around. And now here's the new string, about 3 feet or almost 4 feet, brain tan. You want brain tan, you don't want that anything but brain tan. So over itself, and then crisscross. And I'm pulling pretty hard so it digs in here, so it won't move on me. Wind my way down. I got quite a bit of extra, so I might go around one more time. Take this loose here a little bit. So here's my bow. I'm set to go. Now, with the edges, it's really slippery and I don't want to hit my ropes and break them, or cut them. So this part, initially I will use a flesher. I'll just go and grab a flesher, because if you look carefully, you can see I got down to here, but here the hide bends. If I use the scraper, as I'm putting it down, it's really slippery. And what will happen is I might slide and hit these muscles, and then I put a hole through it. And so the first time, while it's still wet, I'll use a flesher, and I'll go and get a flesher. There's 2 layers of membrane on the leg. This is the upper layer, the kind of dirty part here. And sometimes people get that off and they think they're in the true hide, but they're not. There's this layer, then there's this layer, which is slippery, and this is true hide. So with the Elkhorn scraper, with the flesher, I'll show how to take that off. but you want to get both layers. Otherwise, you try to tan the leg, it'll be black because nothing's going to go through this layer here. So I get the flesher. Fleshers were made from gun barrels they'd go to the blacksmiths from broken guns, and they would make them. Before that, it was a leg bone flesher. But I'll get the flesher and show you how to take that off. This will work too later if it be drier. But you don't want to get that too dry because then it's really tight and hard to get off.
All right, tune in for the next video. He's going to show you how to use the flesher. Thanks for tuning in. Danado Gahai.